And thanks for being with us on Morning Live, and thanks for participating in both our poll and question this morning. And hopefully this interview will give you greater clarity, especially in our poll, in terms of deciding where you think this is headed. Now, an application by former President Jacob Zuma to have the State Capture Commission of Inquiry Chair, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, recuse himself will be heard at the Commission this morning. Now, this comes after Zuma was served with a summons to present himself to the inquiry this week to respond to allegations of corruptions that have been leveled against him. The former president filed the recusal application last Thursday, claiming that family ties that he has with the Deputy Chief Justice Zondo may cloud the Deputy Chief Justice's judgment as chair of the inquiry. Now, the last time the former president appeared at the State Capture Commission, his legal team, led by Advocate Muzi Skhakhane, announced his withdrawal from the proceedings, threatening to approach the courts over the Commission's conduct. Let's get some perspective from political analyst Aubrey Matshiqi as he joins us now via Zoom. Aubrey, good morning. Thanks for being with us here on Morning Live.
Hello.
So let's start with this recusal of the chairperson of the Commission. So, first question, this is not the first time that the former president will be appearing before the Commission. And of course, the last time when this application for the chairperson's recusal was made was also not the first appearance. So what has changed from the time when the former president first appeared before this Commission to him now asking for the recusal of the chairperson?
Well, Sakina, let me start with what has not changed. What has not changed is the perception on the part of the former president and his legal team that the commission has not been treating him fairly. In fact, if you remember, the last time he appeared, the question was raised as to whether he is on trial or not, because the legal team argued that he was being treated like an accused. And therefore, there's been this lingering perception on the part of the former president and his legal team that the commission in general and the chairperson of the commission, Judge Zondo in particular, have not been and are not fair on him. Hence, the recusal application today.
So this is, of course, something that would be dealt with first. And the application is being made, but it will be decided on by the very same Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. So what would Zuma's legal team have to prove in order for this to have merit?
Well, there is the misperception or misunderstanding that the Zuma legal team has to prove actual bias. That is not the case in a recusal application. What is enough and is required is for the Zuma legal team to convince Judge Zondo that there is a reasonable apprehension of bias on the part of the chairperson of the commission. Let me give you an example. Let's say, for instance, a friend of mine is facing charges and I'm the judge. Even if in theory I can preside over the matter impartially and I can be objective, the fact that I can be objective or in theory I can be is not enough. If the person who appears before me has a reasonable apprehension of bias, I as a judge can say to him or her, you have a point and therefore I will recuse myself. So in this case, the Zuma legal team does not have to prove actual bias. All they have to do is to convince the judge that they have a reasonable apprehension of bias on his part. And then he will decide whether he agrees with them or not. In my view, it is highly unlikely that Judge Zondo will recuse himself.
So what would constitute that legal or a reasonable apprehension of bias on the part of the commission chairperson?
Well, let me give another example, Sakina. Let's say you appear in front of a judge And then in the process, the judge says to you, madam, your nose is too big, for argument's sake. The fact that throughout, before that moment, you have not had the feeling that the judge has something in it for you will not matter if from that moment onwards his remarks make you feel uncomfortable and make you feel that he may be biased. In that case, you don't have to prove that the comment that your nose is too big is actual evidence of bias or evidence of actual bias. What is enough for the judge to assess is whether your apprehension is sufficient as a ground for his recusal. So in this case, the legal team argues or will argue that certain statements have been made by the judge which betray a negative posture by the judge towards the former president, or which betray bias towards the former president. Now, the judge has already preempted aspects of the grounds they are going to raise when he spoke to issued a media statement in which he argued that the reference in the letter from the legal team, in which letter they asked him to recuse himself, to family and other relations, refers to a relationship he had with the former president's sister-in-law. Now, of course, he was preempting aspects of the grounds that they may or may not even raise for that matter. And in my view, with that statement, the judge was out of order and unjudicial in his conduct, because I think it is unfair for a judge to speak on a matter before the party appears and do so worse and do so in the media. But I think today we will be able to see, when they expand on the grounds that they alluded to in the letter, whether in the first place the judge was correct in his assertion that the reference to family and other relations is about his relationship with or former relationship with the sister-in-law of the former president. But also, we will see what kind of expansion will occur to other grounds, particularly those which pertain to statements the legal team believes have been prejudicial to the former president and constitute evidence of bias. But as I keep on saying, they don't have to prove actual bias. What is required is the judge to decide whether their apprehension is reasonable or not.
And coming back to the point that it is actually the Deputy Chief Justice, who is the Commission chairperson, who ultimately has to make this decision. So looking at the objective facts before us to date, are you able to come up with an example of one or more of those statements that the Deputy Chief Justice would have made that would give that apprehension of bias on his part?
Well, to be honest, Sakina, I can think of many, but I am loath to state those examples. So I will wait for the legal team to expand on those particular grounds. But there are times when his conduct and his statements, not only with regard to the former president, but with other witnesses, have to me suggested he has already made up his mind. Has already made, or is making his findings as he goes along. And sometimes, to me, it seems that is betrayed in his attitude to some of the people who have appeared before him. Now, of course, this, on my part, may be a misapprehension. But I do think that there are times when I have had cause to be concerned by how the judge has conducted himself towards some of the witnesses.
So, given the gravity of the situation and why this commission was actually set up, this obviously becomes then a very pivotal moment in the commission and the work that it has done and still needs to do. So let's just paint a few scenarios of what could possibly happen here. Should the judge refuse to recuse himself, where does that leave the former president and his legal team? And on the other end, if the judge then decides that he will recuse himself, what does that mean for the commission, the work that it has done to date and going ahead?
Well, let's say he decides to recuse himself. My understanding is that he will be recusing himself as chair of the commission as it pertains to the former president. In other words, he will not be recusing himself as chair of the commission in total. But let's look at another scenario, the one which I think is more likely. I think it is highly unlikely that the judge will recuse himself, in which case the Zuma legal team has the option of going to court to have that decision not to recuse himself reviewed. And I suspect that is more likely.
So, listening to some of the people who have appeared before the commission, especially those who are said to have been closely linked to the former president, many of them have cried foul. Many of them have made similar allegations and said that they felt that they were being persecuted, especially by this commission. What does that mean then, today's application, for all of those who felt that perhaps they were not treated fairly by the commission?
Well, I suspect if I were speaking on behalf of the judge, I would say to them, to the extent that there are some who are unhappy, their unhappiness will have to be treated on merit. In other words, whether the judge recuses himself, there can be no extrapolation from his attitude towards the former president that will extend to others who have expressed similar unhappiness about him. In other words, if they are unhappy and they want the judge to recuse himself in respect to their own matter, then they will have to do their own recusal applications. But remember, we're also dealing with the politics of the matter here. Now, if the judge refuses to recuse himself, there will be some political happiness and unhappiness in the public domain. Similarly, if he refuses to recuse himself, there will be some political unhappiness and unhappiness depending on where people stand politically in relation to this matter. In other words, let's not forget that this tribunal, this commission, to some extent is an extension of the court of public opinion. And therefore, I hope that in making his decision about whether he recuses himself or not, he will not be influenced by what is happening in the court of public opinion.
And then, of course, we saw 2 weeks ago the former SAA board chairperson, Dudu Myeni, appear before the commission in what some would describe as just exasperating, where she kept giving the same answer over and over, save for where she felt that she needed to say something and have that placed on record. So, are we likely to see a similar sort of approach, do you think, from the former president and his legal team, should the judge refuse to recuse himself this morning?
Well, remember that Judge Zondo made a statement at the end in which, amongst other things, he reminded us that Muzi Myeni simply invoked a right she is entitled to, and that the fact that she invoked the right not to incriminate herself does not constitute evidence of her guilt. Now, when it comes to the former president, I think what is likely is that if, let's say, after refusing to recuse himself, the commission insists that the deputy president will face questions and must give his own version, I think the former president will do a Dudu Myeni, will argue that he is not going to incriminate himself, will invoke the right not to incriminate himself. And therefore, we might spend the next few days with the former president simply saying he will not answer certain questions because he does not want to incriminate himself. There is an option, a compromise that is available to the commission and the Zuma legal team. If the former president is prepared to give his version, he may be prepared to do so in writing through an affidavit, in which case we avoid the spectacle of the former president spending days on that stand simply saying he will not incriminate himself and therefore will not answer certain questions. But I suspect that this option would be unsatisfactory to the commission and to many in the public domain.
What is your assessment to this point about the integrity of the commission?
Well, I think commissions of inquiry, before we come to its integrity or the lack thereof, I think commissions of inquiry are a monumental waste of time, and a monumental waste of time. So even before the commission started, that was my attitude. I suspect that at the end of the process, I will be vindicated, in the sense that many years shall have been spent on a commission of inquiry, when what should have happened is that those against whom allegations have been made should have been arrested, prosecuted, and if guilty, convicted. And instead, what will happen in the end, we shall have spent all these years watching a commission of inquiry, which in the end, I am certain will deliver much less than it promises.
And then just moving slightly from the commission, but of course a development that also tracks its way to the commission is of course the arrest and appearance in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court on Friday of the ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule. Aubrey, I'd like to have your view on that, and also once again just sketch a few scenarios for us. Is Ace Magashule going to get out of this, and if so, how does he get out of this, and is he playing for president here?
Well, again, we have been here before. And what you must remember is that legal processes tend to be concluded after legal battles have been settled. So there is the possibility even here that the political battle will be concluded long before the legal process is concluded, which means for the political protagonists, the fight must be fought, be lost and won in the court of public opinion, inside the ANC and in our political landscape. In other words, if you are a Magashule strategist, what you want is Magashule to win the political battle in the court of public opinion, to win the political battle inside the ANC, so that by the time the legal matter is concluded, the political battle has been won to his advantage. In fact, if he wins the political battle, there may be no need for him to be part of a legal battle. Because what we have seen in the past is that our criminal justice system simply anticipates the wishes of those who are in power. So if it does happen that Magashule wins the political battle and ends up being president of the country, because that may be the only way, if he is guilty, that might be the only way in which he stays out of jail. And if he does become president, the criminal justice system will do what it has done in the past, anticipate the wishes of those in power. But if he loses the political battle, then he is stuffed. Because if he is convicted, then he may go to jail.
Well, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. Thank you so much. That was political analyst Gogo Aubrey Matshiqi talking to us about the prospects of former President Jacob Zuma's application for the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who's the chairperson of the Commission into Allegations of State Capture, to recuse himself from that particular commission. And just a final throw in there at the end regarding what's happening with the ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule. And this brings us up to 7 o'clock. Let's bring you the latest news.